Hi, everyone. You're watching The Self Connection with Ginny Brown and Kelly Pietro, where we have conversations with a group of ascended masters known as the multitude of the greater good.
The multitude of the greater good has access to the day of creation, to the present time, um, plus whatever it is that you've chosen to accomplish, and they've agreed or allowed Kelly to ask questions and for me to channel their answers. The allowance is me in the channeling. Kelly can ask her questions whatever she wants, but they've allowed me to channel them. And as I said, they have access to information from the day of creation to the present time, and they let us in on what we need to know about how to be better selves.
Great. Well, Ginny, today is October 2nd. Spooky season is upon us. And thank you for being here. Thanks to the multitude. So we recorded an episode a few weeks ago talking about like paranormal activity. And after we recorded, you and I kind of had more questions. And I think today's a good time to kind of address those questions. And certainly, if our viewers have additional questions, we ask that you send them on in. Uh, there's a link in the YouTube description where you can submit your own questions. So send them on in if you have more after this episode. So I don't know if you remember, Ginny, we were talking and, we were talking about paranormal activity. And you had said, but I don't understand like why people get hurt and how things are moved around, like the physical phenomenon that happens with these types of activities. And we wanted a deeper understanding of that. So, if the multitude would be so kind to enlighten us about, because one of the things they share is like, on the soul level, whether it's through intention of, people playing on Ouija boards or having the intention in the physical realm to connect with anything, right? Or their soul is agreeing to have some sort of experience, paranormal experience. In other words, we're in charge of ourselves on some level and we can kind of contribute and control that. But what about getting hurt, like getting physically hurt? What can they enlighten us about that?
Yeah. Well, they had also said it was like each one's the intention, but each one, it's like not everyone can connect in to this energy. Each one is, some people can, and those are the ones who are seeing, feeling, hearing, whatever it is. And I'm concerned about the frightening parts of it rather than, okay, so there's a person in my kitchen and I can sense that someone's there, but it's not going to bother me or hurt me. So I'm really interested in knowing about the physical part, that like they say demons, the this, the that. So that's what I'm interested in. It is important to understand, my dear, that there are many phenomena. There are those who believe that there are spirits who are quite negative, and those who believe that there are spirits who are quite positive. In our estimation, it is important to understand that each one allows each one's own self to move through the experience that each one wishes to experience. If one is in a place that allows oneself to experience the negativity in a physical way, they will allow themselves to experience a physical experience. We can tell you 99% of the time, there are those who believe it is a physical experience when it is not. It is that part of self that says, hey, I'm here in the earth plane and I'm here to learn. And I would like to know about X, Y, and Z. And we can tell you they will experience X, Y, and Z in the way they perceive it to be. If they believe that it is a frightening experience, it is a frightening experience. If they believe it is an experience detrimental to one's physical being, they will allow that type of experience. We can tell you if it is that one is interested in learning more. One is able to check in with one's own self and understand how one is feeling, what one believes, and how it is to move forward from that place of being. In our estimation, however, it is right to understand that there are some of those things happening. Mostly, however, it is that part of self that says, oh, I'd like to understand how this works. So they experience how this works. Do not be concerned.
Okay, so what comes to mind when you channeled that is, um, I told you last year during October, I felt drawn to like learn up on the Warren files, right? And I can't watch those scary movies. They just are too disturbing for me. But I
Right.
found this podcast that just tells you about, you can just listen to the story and that I can handle. So I was listening to the Lights Out podcast, the Warren Files. And of course, which one do you listen to? The one about Annabelle, right? The most popular one. So in that case, if I'm recalling correctly, uh, the girl is gifted the doll from her mother, right? And it's either her boyfriend, her roommate's boyfriend. When he comes to the apartment and notices the doll, he's like, I don't like that thing. And then next thing you know, he's having, it seemed like the first description sounded like a sleep paralysis experience where the doll was like on top of him and he couldn't move. And the way it was described to me, what came to me was like a sleep paralysis. Oh, you could chalk that up to a dream, right? But then another experience he had, the doll was like physically harming him. He had slashes and was bleeding. And it wasn't just him that experienced that, it was the girls seeing him bleed as well. So, and I don't remember if that was during a sleep paralysis type experience or something else. And then he described it as healing almost immediately, like no scars, no marks, according to the way this podcast was describing it. So to me, it's like, um, he didn't choose that experience. Maybe on the soul level, can they differentiate?
It is important to understand that 99% of what one experiences on the earth plane is created in the soul extension of being. It is that part of self that connects with self and says, oh, this would be interesting to know. That would be interesting to learn. And when one allows oneself to experience those things on the earth plane, they are created quite beautifully. In this instance, however, the story in our estimation is just that, a story. Do not be concerned, all is love.
So they're saying this was made up and it didn't actually happen.
The only story that I heard was that um, the doll was just moving itself. You know, that was it. I didn't hear anything about any kind of physical uh, ab anomaly, abnormality, anything.
Okay. So that's interesting because people do say that, some of these stories have been embellished. So
Yeah.
then the deciphering of truth. Um, But there are other stories out there besides this one where people become harmed, physically harmed. And there are stories where objects are moving around. How can they explain to us in terms that we understand how is that happening?
It is important to understand that some of those things are creative stories, I guess is the word. I don't know. I'm not getting a word, but they're creative. Oh, creative license. Sometimes things happen on a like a small level, and they are embellished as being of a large physical experience. We can tell you 99% of the time there are those things that happen in this lifetime that were created in past lifetimes, however, not necessarily um, get admonished or experienced or allowed the emotional existence of being to be completed. In our estimation, 99% of those things on the earth plane today are those things experienced in a past life experience that have not been fully understood or, I guess, emotionally cleared. In our estimation, however, there are those who are allowing themselves the experience of being harmed on the earth plane, and it is a learning experience indeed. In our estimation, 99% of the time, it is a learning experience rather than a physical desecration of being. In our estimation, however, one would be free to understand it in any way one wishes. And if one wishes to understand it as a, uh, so something else just came to my mind. It's like about a ghost or who's doing this kind of thing. It is important to understand that they can believe anything they wish. If they choose it to be a ghost, it can be a ghost. If they choose it to be a demon, they could be a demon. But 99% of the time, it is neither. It is that part of oneself that is allowing oneself to heal from discrepancies of being created in previous lifetimes of being. Do not be concerned.
Okay, so is it right for me to understand that then as okay, like the visual I'm getting is like, let's say someone's having the experience in this lifetime and they experience it as levitation,
Mhm.
right? I was levitating or I was lifted off the ground. But perhaps in a past lifetime, there was some situation that had that same feeling, that same physical feeling tied to an emotional event that is kind of being overlaid onto this lifetime that makes it seem like it's so much like you're experiencing something bigger than it's actually experiencing. Is that kind of what they're saying?
It is important to understand that is a part of the process. However, that is not the process. In our estimation, when one comes to the earth plane, one has chosen to heal and to clear the emotional abstractness of an experience. Therefore, they allow oneself to recreate the experience in one way or another. Some choose to experience in a physical form. Some choose to experience in an energetic form. Some choose to just experience the feeling itself in order to allow the healing to complete its process. In our estimation, when one experiences such an event in a physical form, one is able and allowing oneself to complete the process in such a way as to bring forth the unhealed emotion that one has created in previous incarnations. And if it is that one has created an experience and not healed it for many generations of incarnations, one will find it to be quite strong indeed, as it needs to be a powerful event in order to allow one to accept, therefore, allowing one to heal the emotion and clear the emotion. In our estimation, that is how it works. However, on the earth plane, it is seen quite differently. When one on the earth plane is allowing oneself to experience the experience, it is quite frightening indeed, as there is no background in order to back up the experience. Do not be concerned. When it is that one is ready to allow oneself the experience of being, one allows oneself the experience of being, acknowledging, knowing, feeling, and sometimes those states are combined into one major anomaly of being. Do not be concerned.
Yeah, so that was kind of, I wanted to touch on that a little bit, like this idea of like layering, the energy getting layered. And so there was another podcast I was listening to. It was either the Battersea Poltergeist or the Witch House. It was, the producer's the same, so I can't remember which one it was. But there was all this paranormal phenomena going on. And when I was listening to it, it sounded like there could be layering, like like a perfect storm of there was stuff that happened on that land, spiritual type activity or trauma, let's say, emotional trauma that maybe happened at that land, emotional trauma that happened in the house, perhaps some ancestral uh, trauma that happened to those people. And so, can it be true that all of those things can create a perfect storm, if you will, for paranormal phenomenon to exist?
It is important to understand that each one is in charge of each one's own self. And if one has decided it is the right time and the right place, one will allow oneself to experience. However, in our estimation, it is important to understand that if it is those things are happening in the same place, it is purely coincidental. Do not be concerned, all is love.
Okay. Another theme that I see in these happenings is like there seems to be a lot, and they kind of just answered it anyway, but just to throw it out there seems to be this theme of like young teenage girls. And of course, a lot of people will say, oh, well, this is when, they're very hormonal, emotions are high. And so, therefore, the emotional component plays a role in this. What can they say about that?
What's the question?
Well, what is true and untrue about the theme of young teenage girls and their emotions playing a part in paranormal activity?
It is important to understand that when one is ready to acknowledge oneself, one does. In our estimation, it is not a matter of being a female or a male, it is a matter of being. And when one is ready to understand that there is more to oneself than that which meets the eye, one will begin to allow the experiences that one has created for oneself. In our estimation, it is important to understand that young teenage girls are quite much more open than young teenage boys or adults of being, in our estimation. When one is open, one receives, regardless of the age, regardless of the gender, and regardless of who one is. When one is ready, one allows. Do not be concerned, all is love.
Okay, well, I have to stay on that for a second because they said young teenage girls are more open than young teenage boys and most adults.
Mhm.
That's interesting. I mean, we definitely, um, I've heard, I've heard it been said, like, you know, girls coming into their womanhood, that is a powerful process. That is a powerful time of life to be open. And I've heard that, right? Have you heard that before?
No, I
Yeah.
haven't.
It's really something that kind of comes out of women's empowerment dialogue that, when you have your first menstrual cycle, it's a powerful time. You're very powerful at that time. That's kind of what I hear in that dialogue. And they just kind of confirmed that, which they don't usually confirm things like that.
It is important to understand that each one is in charge. And if one chooses to allow oneself to feel one's energetic strength at that time, one can. It is an ability of being. If one is wishing, however, not to experience that until a later time or not at all, one will not. It does not matter. The age plays no part. The time of one's uh, like teenage years or expression of self plays no part unless one has decided before coming that that's the time they wish to begin to open. Do not be concerned. When one is ready to open one's heart to oneself, one's heart to one's knowing, one's heart to understanding who one is when one is, one will allow that to allow, it's like allow that to take place. And in allowing oneself to do so, one allows to begin to experience things one wishes to experience differently. Do not be concerned, all is love.
Okay, well then what did they mean by teenage girls are more open than teenage boys and adults?
It is important to understand that there are many on the earth plane who would begin to believe that that is a process. However, it is only an opening of being, and many choose to open at that time. And in our estimation, the girls are more susceptible to feeling their feelings than the boys are susceptible or accessible to feeling their feelings. Do not be concerned.
Would you say that that is because of societal norms, or is that because of something physical or something more spiritually guided?
It is important to understand it does not matter. What matters is that one opens when one is ready. And if a boy on the earth plane chooses to focus differently, a boy will focus differently. If a boy, however, chooses to begin to open to one's feelings, that is also quite acceptable. However, 99% of the time, they are more interested in sports or something of the sort to take up their energies of being rather than recognizing their feelings of love, care, understanding, hurt, shame, fear, any of the above. Do not be concerned.
Wow, 99%. That's a big
Yeah,
number. I do see more and more young men uh, being more in touch with their feelings, which is nice.
yeah. It
Okay.
is to understand that that is part and parcel to the allowance of one to be who one is. When one is expected or the expectations of another is that a boy has a certain responsibility of being that a girl does not, or a girl has a certain responsibility of being that her counterpart does not. One is able to move forward differently. In our estimation, it is important to understand that those on the earth plane at this time have chosen to experience life differently. Therefore, their surroundings are different. Their acceptance of being is different. Therefore, they are able to open to themselves more frequently and it's like more easily. Do not be concerned, all is love.
Okay, well, that was a little side quest um, that I didn't expect. I want to go back to the questions about the paranormal stuff. That might be a really good theme, though, for a future episode to dive into this a little bit deeper
Okay.
about the differences of a female embodied person versus a male.
I just got it's unimportant.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I don't know. That's what I got.
Yeah, okay. Okay, so my next question is, what is the role of fear as it pertains to paranormal activity?
It is important to understand that fear is that part of oneself that says, oh, I'm not quite so sure I'm in the right place at the right time doing what I've come to the earth plane to do. Therefore, one allows the fear feeling to express itself. In our estimation, when one is ready to move forward, one does. And if it is that one is standing in one's own way, so to speak, unable to allow oneself to experience those, it's like those finer things of being, one will allow oneself to focus on the more negative things of being, therefore creating in their own experience those parts of being that are unallowable, indistinguishable, unable to be excised in such a way. In our estimation, it is important to understand that each one is in charge. And if one is interested in allowing the experiences of medieval uh, exhortation, one will allow it. Do not be concerned, all is love. Medieval.
Wow, that sounds
Interesting.
like the exorcism, allowing an exorcism, but medieval. I guess it's an ancient, maybe it's an ancient practice.
Exhortation, whatever that is, not
Exhort. Let's look it up. Exhortation.
yeah.
Um, An address or communication emphatically urging someone to do something. Oh, this is an interesting result. What does exhortation mean biblically? Biblically, an exhortation is a strong personal appeal to encourage and admonish believers in their faith and spiritual walk. Okay, well now I can't remember what they said. That made us look that up. Like,
What's the non-biblical, non-biblical?
um, according to Oxford Languages, it's an address or communication emphatically urging someone to do something. So it's like asking for help.
Hmm,
Um, Merriam-Webster says language intended to incite and encourage. What did they even say now in that sentence? Do you remember?
I don't know. You'd have to ask them again.
We'll have to, well, we can go back and our viewers can rewind, right?
Right.
Okay, so last question, I think. Yeah, I guess I'm just curious if the law of attraction or like this idea of manifestation is what's happening. Maybe those are two different things. Like the idea of manifesting energy into reality. Is that kind of what is happening with paranormal activity? Like the emotions are so strong that it manifests physical phenomenon?
Isn't that what they've been talking about the whole time?
Yeah, but I guess what I'm trying to decipher is like, is something physically actually happening? Because like we see stuff on cameras that things levitate and things happen. Or is it something that's happening more in the mind that is being experienced in the mind, and it's like overlaid with the physical, so it feels bigger than it actually is. I guess, and I know there's different types of experiences, but I guess trying to get to the bottom of like, how is this happening? Why is this happening? Like, is it that there's all this energy that manifests and can create a physical phenomenon? I want better answers, Ginny. I want, I want answers that satisfy the ego, which of course, uh,
Yeah.
that doesn't always happen with the multitude.
I can only give you what they're giving me. That's all.
Yeah. No, I
They-
know. You're doing great.
You
I'm
know,
just,
they're not giving them to me. They're just speaking through me. So
yeah. I want them to explain it in earthly ways. Can they come down a couple notches for me?
we already have, they said. Um,
Ellen, I'm here in jest. I'm not trying to be disrespectful. It's
It is important to understand that as one moves forward, one will bring to them that which they need in any way or manner that they choose. If one chooses to allow it to manifest on the earth plane, they will set that up. Um, Sometimes in spirit and sometimes as they go through life, as there are things that are not understandable on the earth plane as to how things are produced and processed. In our estimation, however, it is important to understand that each one is in charge. And if each one decides that they wish to allow it to manifest itself, to use your words, it will. In our estimation, the law of attraction has very little to do with it. It has to do with what one person needs or wants or allows in one's own lifetime. Therefore, we would highly recommend that you allow the law of attraction to remain as it is. As one wishes to move forward, one will bring to them that which they need, and that is the law of attraction. In our estimation, it is quite right that one allow oneself to experience that which one requires. However, in our estimation, it is up to them to decide what that is. Do not be concerned, all is love.
okay. I'll leave it at that.
Okay, all righty.
Thanks, Ginny. Thank you to the multitude for being patient with me as I try to understand these things.
It is important to understand that we are most pleased that you are aware and able to ask these questions of being. You are also allowing us to become aware of things that we have not been introduced to. Therefore, it is important for you to understand that our information is based on our experience of being and the Akashic records. We can only share what we know about what has happened, not about what will happen, as it is not our expertise. We would, however, like to commend you on your ability to, it's like to ask, to inquire, to allow, to it's like to be so inquisitive. In our estimation, it is quite right for you, as you have planned that before coming to the earth plane. And now you are allowing your plans to manifest. Do not be concerned, all is love.
Oh, that's good. I'm glad my inquisitiveness doesn't frustrate them. Yeah, I keep picturing like, we're from like these two different worlds and we're trying to speak one language and it's like, well, no, what I'm trying to say is this. And they're like, yeah, but what we're saying is this. And I'm like, yeah, but tell me more. And they're like, that's all we got.
But did you hear what they said about your asking questions?
Yeah, like uh I guess it's appreciated.
Yes, but they also said you have planned to do it before coming to the earth plane, and now you are allowing to happen, which
Yeah,
is what they've been saying through the whole thing.
yeah, yeah.
So,
It definitely mirrors the conversation. So,
yeah. Okay.
all
Well,
right, Ginny, thank
everyone,
you.
thank
Thank
you, Kelly, for your questions. Thanks everyone for coming. I hope I hope you've enjoyed this experience. And
you.
join us again.
Great. We'll see you guys next time on the Self Connection.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye.